when someone tells you to eat a healthy diet? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So you're back on here with us with Dr. Adam Holsworth, Dr. Pega Magadam, and myself, Vahid Yagane. And we're going to be discussing what this means to each of us in each of our worlds. For those of us joining us for the first time, Adam is a physical therapist, a doctor in physical therapy. Pega is a doctor and she's a clinical psychologist. And I am an MD who specializes in family medicine and metabolic disease. So things like obesity and diabetes, that kind of stuff. So we're going to see how our opinions might differ on this. I just thought it'd be interesting for us to discuss what that even means before we even get into the weeds, on future episodes of what is a healthy dietary pattern. What does it actually mean to each of us who are in the healthcare field? Because I feel like there's always going to be some overlap, but also differences in how we perceive that. So um, I will do the disclaimer for the first time here. Let's do this. So the information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. And with that, we will get started. Welcome to Take 3 and Call Me in the Morning.
Yeah, take that, lawyers.
How are you guys doing?
Suckers.
You did a great job.
That was my first cold open. I think I didn't crush it, but we're getting there.
Oh, crushed it.
How are you guys feeling today?
Doing well. Can't complain. Been a busy week. How about you guys?
Yeah.
I've
Busy?
got some allergies, so if I mute myself, it's because I'm sneezing or coughing.
We broke records. If anybody's not aware, we are all in Atlanta, Georgia. This is early April, and apparently previous weekend we crushed some records with pollen. I read 60% more than the most previous record. I don't know if that's accurate. May have read it on Reddit, so top-notch journalism there. But good times for people with allergies for sure.
Yeah. So I'll get right into it. I'm gonna give myself the benefit of going last, just because I'm taking the wheel today. So you guys can, whoever wants to jump in first. When I say, go and eat a healthy diet, or think of what you consider to be a healthy diet, I want you to tell me what that means to you, or what you consider that to be.
I want Pega to go first.
All right, there you go. You drew the short straw.
Haha, I got her.
I didn't see a not it. This time I'm gonna need you to do the not it.
We did it under the table, so sorry.
Fair. Okay, so this is so complicated. But I'm really just trying to put myself on the couch. I'm trying to be the client for a moment and consider it for myself. One of the things that comes to mind when I think about a healthy diet is that it's not static. It's ever evolving and changing. And so we're if we're considering that a person would think about it from the perspective of, this is the one thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it in this one way perfectly for the rest of my life, I think that's a recipe for disaster to start with. So I really think that it's ever changing, ever evolving. It's not something that it's something that you have to have a kind of a relationship with. For lack of a better word, you have to have a relationship with your diet. What I remember I used to say years ago in my many iterations of being a psychologist is I would say your relationship with food is your relationship with basically everything else in life, whether it's money, your friends, your family, your romantic partner. Look at the pattern you have in those relationships, and you'll probably figure out your relationship with food. So another thing about having a healthy diet is to understand yourself first, to know what is it that I am, what is it that I'm doing with food, because it's not just consumption of consumption, food in, energy out, and then we're done. It's so much more complicated than that. So that's another layer of it. Like, what is this food to me? What does it do? How do I relate to it? How do I engage with it? Is it, sometimes people say like, it's an afterthought. I just need to fuel my body and keep going. And then others have truly a relationship with their food, maybe a dysfunctional one, but it happens to have more meaning to them. So bringing it back to myself and keeping all of those things in mind, I think for me, a healthy diet does need to feel enjoyable. Like,
Mhm.
I've got to have joy. If we think about it in my relationship with food, my relationship with food has to have joy. Um, it's got to be flexible. So kind of, um, I've I am not this person who can eat just one type of thing every breakfast, every morning.
Mhm.
I will get sick of it no matter what. So for me, I do have to have variety in my eating. Um, Now, I think that I can learn from others in the sense that sometimes I'll forget about my food, right? My relationship, I'll neglect it and I'll have to go back and re-engage with it. But more than anything, it's variety, flexibility, joy, a willingness to shift if I need to. So if my body is asking for something that I need more of, or I need to get, I need to listen to that. And I actually appreciate that. It's like a good challenge. But also, these days, having gotten the exposure or the information that I've gotten, I wish I had gotten it when I was younger, because my body naturally is does better with plant-based foods. So do without what you want. I love a burger, and I can do a fried chicken sandwich, at some point. So it's not so much that I'm saying yes or no to
Mhm.
something. Just I like to kind of see when I am engaging with food and food is responding back and giving me messages, how do I feel? When do I feel more energy? When do I feel less energy? When does my digestive tract give me all the good, lovely things of regularity? And when does it not? Um, and so I've found that plant based, fibrous things just happen to be good for me. Doesn't mean it's always delicious or the preferred meal. But again, that flexibility is important for
Can I
me.
ask you a question? I'm gonna
Yeah.
interject here for a second. So, a couple things I found really interesting. One was you said that, you know, tell me your relationship with food and I'll tell you kind of your relationship with everything else, or maybe it was the other way around. But I'd love for you to sort of give me an example if you could. But the other piece of this was, I guess it's important here to mention that you have specific training in eating disorders, right? So your background as a psychologist who has worked with eating disorders and probably continues to do so with some cases, I'm guessing. So, do you feel that that's factored into how you approach your own relationship with food? So
Yeah.
I'll leave it at those two questions because I don't want to bombard you all at once.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's an accident, like kind of cobbler and shoes situation when it comes to any therapist, psychotherapist at the very least, where we're working, at some point, we're working through something that brought us to this part of the field. So I was definitely working through this. I always say, I was a kid who grew up in the United States in the 1990s. Like, hello, like you have very specific ideas of what a body should look like and what's beautiful and what's not, um, thin versus fat, like that kind of pressure to belong, the pressure to be, um, you know, desired, whatever the case might be. And then you pair that with the messaging I got growing up in my family, um, uh, around whatever the case might be. It used to be a lot of all or nothing thinking, like either you're on a diet or you're off the rails. So there was a lot of that kind of feeling of like, well, either you're failing or you're having to put a lot of pressure on yourself to be perfect. So in this eating disorder world, like my mind was opened up where where we I had to walk the walk and talk the talk. I mean, I was eating meals with my clients
So
with
was that putting? Do you feel like that was putting extra pressure on you? Like, could it be almost negative? You think that?
it was training for
Okay,
me at
okay,
first.
okay.
Yeah. It was like watching my own tendencies to have, rigid beliefs around eating. Like the dietitians, for example, in my the facility where I worked, there was no bad food. There was just no such thing as food and bad
Mhm,
together. So you had to break these belief systems that you had. And I
mhm,
didn't realize how many I really had, even looking at my plate, and then here's my client over there. Someone might be struggling with restrictive eating, and they're saying something like, well, I can't have um this much of a carb on my plate, or that piece of whatever is too big, or some kind of rule based idea. And then
mhm.
here, what we were teaching and learning was intuitive eating. Like, it's not from up here that you decide what your body needs, it's from your body, from your belly, from your nerve not nervous system, that's later in my life. But um that's the starting point. And then you had another question. um
No, I'm trying to remember my own question. Okay, so that was a good answer. It was the your relationship with food and how that will tell you about your other relationships. How does that
right.
like if it, give me like a simple example.
So a very, very simple example could be um, this, because of the eating disorder world, right? Like
Mhm,
when we look at a very basic concept in eating disorders, old school, kind of to sum it up in a very nutshell sort of way that doesn't feel very respectful of my clientele. But it's like, if we look at an eating disorder as a way in which a person tries to over control life. And so then we have someone who's, restrictive in their patterns. Again, very rule based, rule bound. I can only eat these types of foods. I can only eat them at this time and this amount and on
mhm.
these days. And what did I eat this morning and what am I allowed to eat this afternoon? Like literally allowed, that word.
Yep,
Like I'm
yep.
not allowed, right? And then you look at, okay, how do you attempt to create control in other areas of your life?
Hmm,
And how does that help you to feel safe in some ways? And
interesting.
then enter trauma work many years later, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. You need to feel safe. You need to feel in control where you otherwise might not have felt safe, or might not have had a sense of control or power.
Mhm,
Makes sense that you would do that with food, just like you would do that with, you know, money or X, Y, and Z.
mhm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm summarizing for you here. So correct me if I'm wrong. That for you, what you would consider a healthy diet is gonna then therefore look not the same for everybody, and for yourself, it's sort of drawing from this concept of mindful eating, kind of that you are paying attention to your cues, sort of more intuitive, less about what are the numbers and what are the exact sort of things on my plate, more about what makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel or make your body feel good. And so you said mostly plant based will generally your body tends to tolerate it better. Um, okay, I like that. And then the biggest piece I feel like you mentioned was that your relationship with the food is so important, and so a healthy diet requires a healthy relationship with food. Is that feel like I'm
Great job.
summarizing? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
I think
That was
so.
all AI, by the way. Um, Adam, I'm gonna uh, throw this question your way. What in your life, in your world, so you can talk whether it's in your field in physical therapy, or it could just be personal experience. No wrong answers here. What does it mean to you when I say, healthy diet?
Yeah, I'll go personal experience because I think the field would be entirely too broad. And it's really interesting to hear Pega discuss this because that she is going to be able to discern a lot about me from what I say, I believe, because I consider food a tool, purely a tool. I don't get a
Yeah.
ton of enjoyment out of food personally. It's not something that I'm looking forward to. I actually really dislike sitting down at a table with a bunch of other people and having a meal. I feel pretty trapped. So, Pega, we can talk about
Mm.
this later.
Yeah.
But I think about food as a tool. What am I trying to get out of that? Where am I trying to facilitate my body or my activity or my goals? And how would food or nutrition complement that? Right? Am I trying to build muscle mass for some sort of power output or power sport? Am I trying to build different type of muscle for some sort of endurance sport? Am I trying to lean down? It's dictated by what are the functional or even athletic outcomes. So in terms of a healthy diet, I would agree that, as we will hear a lot with all the three of us, it depends.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, it's have you, first of all, do you know what your body does well with? I think that's where a lot of people could begin the journey, is just taking notes or having more of a scientific approach, right? Reflect upon what you're putting into your body and how it's affecting you, right? Are my sleeping habits changed? Is my energy changing? Are my workouts or activity changing? Is my cognition changing? Similar to what we might call an elimination diet, but keeping tabs on the things that we're putting into our body. And you can go really deep into that and start working with a dietitian and getting lab work and trying to titrate all these macronutrients and micronutrients. But I really like the thought process of trying different things, seeing how it affects you, and how it affects you with the goals that are important to you. Right. For me personally, importance comes from, am I adding pounds to my 1 rep max? I'm a power lifter. That's kind of how I base my resistance training around. So that is how I see improvement. That's what motivates me to get back in the gym and continue working. So I want to see that. When you start getting further into your athletic career or exercise career, you start to lose the newbie gains, right? All the changes that come quickly just because your body is adapting to something that you haven't done. So then you really start to have to titrate the other things, right? Sleep, nutrition, hydration, timing of food. But in terms of answering your question specifically to me, I have a moderate protein, moderate carb, and I would say low to moderate fat intake. Again, that's going to be dependent on what I'm doing that day or that week, or if I'm even preparing for something. Because in preparation for like a powerlifting event, for example, that's going to be totally different than just my going into clinic treating patients Monday through Friday type of situation, right? So I don't want to speak specifically to types of food. I think there's so much behind that. And I really like what Pega said. Beyond that, okay, what is your relationship to food? Like, what
Mhm.
value are you getting, whether it's culturally or in any number of these surrounding variables? But yeah, I use food as a tool. So, do with that what you will, Pega. I'm sure you have some comments surrounding that regarding me, but I'll send it back over to you two.
Well, I will say, like, I can so appreciate. I'm like, I don't even. There are some things I'm certain that I would need. It always makes me happy that the three of us are doing this together because there are things that I could learn from you and integrate into my values based relationship with food. I just wanted to say that. Like, I'm not.
I already learned, and this is why I'm so excited to continue working and talking to the two of you. I'll say this, and then I want to hear from Vahid. I already learned so much just from what you said, because I kind of feel silly that I didn't even consider that. It's such a huge part of what I do, is trying to create behavior and lifestyle changes. And I'm always talking to people and discussing biomechanics and body weight and loading on different joints. Okay, if the outcome we're trying to reach is less body weight to minimize load on a joint, how do we actually create that behavior change? And I've been historically talking about tracking macros and getting in the habit of understanding portion size and blah blah blah. I've never even considered talking with somebody about, okay, what is your relationship with food? So I appreciate that. You're making me a better therapist.
You too.
I
And will
love
you
that.
tell us about these competitions you do at some point?
Sure.
Yeah.
Once I actually do well in one, I will tell you guys.
That won't be fun. It's more fun if you're not doing well. I will say for anyone that's listening that most of the conversations we have here, we're having for the first time together. I'm learning in real time things about Pega, things about Adam, and so I say that so that folks listening understand that we're not rehearsing any of this, and a lot of times I'm guarding some of these questions just to get a more honest response. And um, I do really appreciate the honesty and vulnerability. And that's as I get into sort of my answer on this question. Talking about food can be very emotionally intense. So, kind of to your point, Pega, it y- you know if you're on social media, and I know you're not, Pega, which I'm very jealous of and proud of you, but if you are, you'll know that there's always these different schools of thought and people going, oh no, you got to eat this way, no, you got to eat that way. Like, it's for some reason it's always emotionally charged. Like, there's very few sort of gentle conversations around food when there's differing viewpoints, and I think that has a lot to do with just how sensitive this topic can be. So again, for the two of you to share sort of to the extent that you did, honestly, I wasn't expecting it to be that vulnerable and honest. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised. So thank you for that. I just wanted to know what it sounds like, but also to show that it's always going to be a different answer, right? What you said, Pega, about sort of the rules around food, and not too many carbs, or one that I get a lot is, oh, I was good, so I was able to eat such and such thing, or I misbehaved last week and I ate such and such thing. I hear those statements a lot in my line of work, and in those moments I'm like, oh man, like we got some work to do, right? But it's very, very, very common. I would say, I don't know, if I had to put into numbers, like 99% of folks I talk to about food, and that's pretty much everybody that comes to my office. Food is one of the pillars of health. We talk about nutrition. Is that there is almost always a broken relationship with food. I would argue that probably all of us have, to some degree, a broken relationship with food. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't, to some degree, or at some point hasn't, right? So there's nothing wrong with you if we're saying these things and you're feeling like, oh no, that's me. Yeah, congratulations. You're like everybody else. We're all in this together, right? You're not alone. And it probably has a lot to do with something that you said, Adam. You said a really important word here is the cultural aspect of food, right? And that's something that we really need to take into account. So I'll start jumping into sort of how I would answer that question. And I
Yeah,
always,
now that you've qualified your answer for 5 minutes.
right? Yes, thank you. Hey,
I
uh,
see you. I
I,
see you.
Means to be
I've not been
motivated.
one to be what's the word, to be stingy with words. I'm a very wordy guy, so I apologize. um, okay, so I always like to start that type of conversation or that kind of answer with the following: if we are talking about dietary patterns or this versus that, and this is healthy versus that's not healthy, all of that is a privileged conversation. completely privileged because there is food scarcity, even right here in the US. There are communities that struggle with access to food, period. There are communities that struggle with access to high quality, sort of good, whole foods, and might only have sort of like a couple of fast food chains nearby. So, what we call food deserts. So, it is a privileged conversation. I say that because I want that to be very clear, is that if we're having these conversations, then you're one of the fortunate people that is able to choose how you're going to eat, right? So I think that's an important thing when we talk about a healthy diet. And so the first way I would answer that is a healthy diet is one you have access to. Um, Period, right? If you don't have access to it, then what's the point of the rest of that conversation? When I think of healthy diet, so part of what I'm going to say kind of overlaps with what you said, Pega, is that it's going to vary. There is, in my opinion, there is no sort of like one magical dietary pattern that exactly works for everybody, right? We all have slightly different gastrointestinal systems and microbiomes, and our physiology is, going to respond a little bit differently to different foods, different ingredients. So it's going to look a little different for everybody. What I would consider sort of the overlapping stuff, the vast majority of what tends to be common in what I consider to be healthy diets are the consumption of whole foods, right? So foods that are minimally or unprocessed. When I say processed foods, like the name suggests, food that's gone through multiple processes to get to your plate, right? And I think that's an area which, no matter where you sit on the dietary pattern spectrum, we can all agree that highly processed foods are probably not great for you, right? So that's one area where I could say with some degree of confidence that would represent a healthy diet for me would be minimizing ultra processed foods, right? Um, and that's not to say that it can't be, some of that can't be a part of a healthy diet, right? But we're minimizing it, avoiding as much as we can. The other part I would say is probably making sure that there's enough fiber intake. So if we're focusing just on the US population, most of us are probably under fiber. We're not getting enough fiber in our day to day, and fiber is important for so many things. And we could do an episode where we kind of dive into these details and bring on a dietitian to give us even more insight into these areas. But generally speaking, I would say your fiber sources would also be as close to whole food as possible, right? So fruits, vegetables, whole grains. That's a topic that gets a little bit of controversy. When I talk about whole grains, some folks start to panic. They go, hold on, you just mentioned a whole bunch of carbs, fruits and veggies and whole grains. These are all carbs, and carbs are bad for you, right? Because that's what I've been taught. So that's a whole other, we could talk about carbs in maybe 5 episodes back to back and maybe not cover all of it. So I would say that in addition to that, adequate protein. Now, I feel like a lot of us don't have that problem. We're probably getting enough protein, but yes, there are certain populations that are probably not getting enough protein, and our protein needs will change depending on our age, our stage in life of our children, if we're pregnant, breastfeeding, that kind of stuff. So for me, in a nutshell, a healthy diet is one that you can access, is one that's low in ultra processed foods, is one that, to kind of, I'm not picking on you, Adam, but brings you some joy, right? That there's something about it that excites you, because I feel like it is a cultural experience. It is a human experience to taste and savor food. And so for me personally, that's important. Um, those are the major things. Now, again, when I talk about access, the cultural aspect plays into that as well. Like, does this tie in with your, not just your values, the way that you're eating, right? But with what your culture eats. And we live in a multicultural place, and so I think that's important to factor in as well. Um, the other part of a healthy diet that we haven't touched on, that I would love to hear your input on from either of you, is that eating is a very social experience, right? We tend to gather around food. So we'll have Thanksgiving dinner, right? Christmas dinner, depending on what culture, what you follow. There's always, in any culture or any religion you go around, there are moments of gathering around food. This is throughout history, and so it's a part of our human experience is to gather and have this social experience of nourishing ourselves with this food. And so I feel like part of a healthy diet is that with it should come some kind of social connection as well. That has to do with your health as well, right? And as we speak more in future episodes, we can talk about how social connections actually impact your health. But I feel like I've spoken enough already. Does anybody want to kind
Well,
of
do
jump
you
in here?
think that I'm curious to try to get a better understanding of, or even see if there's any literature out there. Do you think there is an aspect to the, I don't know what to call it, we'll call it positivity of eating, that can physiologically change how we are breaking down or upregulating or downregulating enzymes with food? Like, could one person metabolize a specific food in a different way than another just based on like psychological well-being or environment or experiences? Is that a thing?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know any data on that. If I had to answer intuitively, I would say that we do have differences in our microbiomes, right? And our microbiome has a lot to do with how we digest certain foods and how that bacteria, excuse me, in our intestines breaks down certain parts of our food. So in that sense, probably yes. I don't know about psychologically. I have no data on that. That'll be interesting to actually dig up and find out. Do you know anything, Pega?
What I do know that we talk about a lot is that one of the reasons we want to take out the messaging around good food, bad food, I've been bad, I've been
Mm-hmm.
good, I should, I shouldn't, is because there's a layer of stress around that
Mm-hmm.
way of approaching food, and that at that point your relationship with food becomes so fraught that I this is a, I can't quite remember the research on this, but just imagine what happens if my body is secreting cortisol when I say, oh my God, I'm being so bad eating this cake,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to say, building the cake into my overall healthy eating profile, enjoying it that day, and then going back to whatever the next day. That's going to have a different, I think it's going to have a different impact chemically, physiologically on the way that I digest the food and how the body processes the food and so
Let's
on.
ask the robots. I am a close cousin to the robots, as you guys now know, because I am joyless and I take zero joy out of social eating or
I
food.
love it.
We're
Yes.
having the next podcast over dinner. With
Yes.
you guys
Oh
on here.
no,
There's
please
nothing
don't.
like us chewing on a dynamic
I,
microphone. It's going
I
to be
will
amazing.
be remote. I won't go through all this. I was just curious, so I chat GPT'd it. So,
Okay,
like the effects of cortisol on macronutrient metabolism, right?
let's
So,
hear it.
carbohydrates specifically is increases blood sugar availability. So, cortisol stimulates gluconeogenesis, which is the glucose production from non-carb sources in the liver. So, it would reduce the glucose uptake by muscles and fat cells. So if you have a higher cortisol level, you are not able to get as much glucose into the muscles and fat cells to later use as energy. So that's interesting. So it's kind of giving me a short-term example, helpful for quick energy during stress or exercise type of thing, which that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And maybe ChatGPT is hallucinating again,
Uh,
but or maybe I just misread it.
Oh, read it again, and I'll try and make sense of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay,
the part that the last part. Yeah.
it reduces glucose uptake by muscles and fat cells, keeping blood sugar elevated for immediate energy. Oh, okay.
Ah,
So it's
because you're in a
keeping it
stress.
in the
Yeah.
bloodstream.
So
Okay.
you're when you're stressed, like in fight or flight,
Yeah.
right? Your body's trying to. So glucose is your body's preferred energy source, and so it's probably keeping it on tap for you to be able to either bolt or whatever you need to do, right?
Yeah.
So that would make sense physiologically. So that acute stress is fine. I don't think that is detrimental, and I think that's what our friend Chat GPT, or as my wife will call it, Chad. Every time I write something,
Chad,
Chad.
no. Well,
Um,
quickly, just for the audience,
mhm.
as a very quick and lay person understanding, we have a couple of different metabolic pathways to utilize energy, right? To create ATPC or ATP, right? Adenosine triphosphate, which is kind of like the energy substrate that our body uses to do stuff. Pew, 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 right? So, depending on what we want to do, we could manipulate one of those pathways, right? Creatine phosphate pathway for like quick, short bursts, 8 to 10 seconds. Anaerobic pathway, which is more like muscle glycogen stores, 2 to 3 minutes type of stuff, and then aerobic using oxygen, which is a longer kind of cascade of events to create that ATP, but it's more efficient, so you could do it for a longer time. So when if people had a better understanding of that, they could titrate their needs a little bit. Are you an endurance athlete, or do you have to be moving at a lower pace for a longer period of time? Okay, maybe you want to have this specific diet. Or are you a power athlete that needs to maintain a lot of muscle mass in quick, short bursts? Okay, maybe you want to think about adding a little bit more protein in the diet. But I just thought that would be a good opportunity to throw that out.
Yeah.
Metabolic pathways, people.
Well,
And now, can you recite the Krebs cycle for me?
absolutely. Just give me 1 second. What's the
Chad,
website for
producer
ChatGPT?
Chad.
Yeah. Um, no, that's really good. I will call you out on the fact that you said for the average layperson, and I'm like, that was a lot of stuff that I think is gonna be worth us getting into for a whole episode, because I like what you said and I want to learn from what you're saying as well. So maybe at a future date we can break that down, just to so folks can understand what exactly is ATP, etc. And maybe because I'm a visual learner, so maybe even like looking at those pathways visually and saying, look, if it goes down here, that's how we get the ATP here. And but that stuff I don't like, the the energy for like a quick burst, and I don't know anything about that. I want to learn about this. So for selfish reasons, I would like to pick your brain more about that.
Yeah,
Um,
apologies to the lay
yeah.
people. I went a little deep on that, but I got excited.
No, but that's good. That's good. Actually, gave me some ideas for future conversations. All right, cool. So yeah, I today was just really about demonstrating how different the answer to that question can be from person to person. And the three of us work in the healthcare field, and we have totally different, well, not totally different, but varying answers for sure. Um,
Pretty different. I mean, if
yeah, like
somebody came into the three of us and said, "I feel too heavy. What do I do?" I think those treatment plans would look insanely different, which is
okay,
very cool, very interesting to me.
that would that see now here I am writing notes though. We should do like a sample case like that. We should have like person X walks in. This is their like how would each of us? I think that's a really good idea. Um, what I didn't mention in my answer,
Person X.
person X,
It
yeah.
sounds so intense. Patient X.
What I didn't mention is, what I have gleaned from the data that I've read to be the best dietary, quote unquote, best dietary pattern, is because I wanted to answer the question as just me as a person eating, right? Not me as a physician looking at a person X's situation and deciding. I will say that probably if we had to sort of sum it all up, um, something plant forward, right? So, as a lifestyle medicine physician, I do have a lot of training in plant based eating, but I feel like it's not necessarily for everyone, but everybody can benefit from increased fiber and increased whole foods. So, I'll leave it there because I feel like those are, again, deeper conversations that we can get into and bring on a registered dietitian to really give us even more insight in these areas. So, I want to move on, unless anybody has anything they wanted to add. I want to
I
move
do.
on.
I do
Yeah, go
want to
ahead.
just add about the Chat GPT concept that we were talking about. We were talking about the acute stress
Mhm.
and how the body takes up energy. And I think a lot of times what we're dealing with our patients are more in the chronic stress department.
Yes.
and how that can look different. I just
Absolutely.
wanted to put that out there, how it seems to almost be a diametric opposite
100%.
dealing with chronicity versus the
Yeah,
acute.
and I appreciate you bringing that up because that goes for a lot of things. Acute versus chronic, thinking about the same metabolite or thing or substrate or whatever, is going to behave very differently, right? Acute versus chronic inflammation, acute versus chronic higher levels of cortisol. So
Mhm.
I appreciate you making that distinction.
Yeah. Actually, we could probably talk about stress. I think that would be a cool topic for us to get into, that sort of like chronic low level stress and chronic low level inflammation versus acutely, and why do we even have that response, right? I think Pega could fill in on that. You could fill in. So that would be a cool topic for us to collaborate on.
Robot Adam does not feel stress.
Yeah, we need a session after this off of camera. We need to have a talk. No, I'm just kidding. Um, all right, so I will move on to keep it a little bit lighter to a section which I'm choosing to call me in the morning, right? So that second part of our title. And this is where I'm going to take questions that either I've been asked or one of you guys have been asked, whether that's from patients, clients, friends, whoever, or folks that are writing in to us, that we can address. So I'm going to go ahead and ask today a question that I've been asked by a patient in the past, which I found really cool, and honest question. And the question was, do you yourself do all the things you're asking me to do in order to be healthier? Um, so I want each of you to kind of uh, do with that what you will. I can start off and I can say that, um, do I intend to? Do I intend to follow exactly, practice what I preach? Absolutely, 100%. I'm always striving. It's a dynamic process, not just for me, for anybody. And I think that's important to hear because, um, folks might walk in here and just take like a glance at me, hear me talk, and go, "Oh yeah, this, of course you're going to say these things because that's how you live, and anything outside of that is not perfect, and you have these certain expectations." And it's not the case. And I would say probably for anybody in our positions, is we have the same kind of challenges everybody has. So I do think about all of these pillars of health that I sort of counsel people on, right? So those pillars of health being nutrition, physical activity, sleep, stress reduction, social connections, and avoiding toxic stuff. So I do my best to incorporate as much of that as possible. I would say for the most part, I do well, but there are days I do not eat well, or I might skip meals where I shouldn't be. There are days that I am not managing my stress as well as I could be. I would say that's where probably I do the worst. There are days where I'll grab my phone in bed. I mean, that's one of the biggest no-nos if you're trying to get a good night of sleep, is screen time, especially while you're lying in bed. I still occasionally I'll do it if I think of something and I need to ask chat or Chad, I'll jump in there or whatever. So my answer to that is I always strive to. Yes, I'm always working towards those things, and I don't always get it 100%, and that's perfectly okay because I don't expect anybody to get it 100%, 100% of the time. But is that if I had to ask you guys that question, how would you respond to that?
Go ahead, Pega.
Okay. Um, so I'm trying to think back on an example of a circumstance, actually, considering, I'm living in this world of like flexibility and intuitive eating and intuitive movement, like just a lot of, kind of a probably very different from what, might be happening in your world, Adam. But I remember it was a couple of winters ago, and I just was saying, my body just needs to sit. My body just needs to rest or whatever. So I'm just kind of using that as an example. And my husband was like, not sure that that's okay. But I don't know. I'm not the professional here. And we'll probably get into, how he's impacted me over time, because he really does a very good job. Like, he would never bring the cell phone into the bed, and if I have it, he's like kind of reminding me, and I love that. I definitely picked him for a reason. But I remember just kind of asking myself, wait a second, something's up, right? something's up that I don't have the energy to go outside, even for a walk, and let alone other things that I know help me to feel good. And the more I inquired about it, the more I realized, oh, I have pain. I was having some knee pain at the time, and I needed to get that figured out rather than just go with what I was inclined to do, which is to go sedentary. Um, and that was very, very helpful to almost just question myself, right? If I'm asking my clients to really look at their relationship with X, Y, and Z, then I started to ask myself that same question, whether it's um, I find that I am maybe not defaulting to the whole foods that I love to cook. I really do. I really love to cook whole foods, but if I don't, what's going on with my in my life? So that was one is an example of a time where I just said to myself, yes, I do believe in the intuitive way of moving your body and adjusting based on the season, whether you have injury, whether something is chronic versus acute, but also remember that really be curious as to why something's shifted. And once I figured out the knee thing, and of course, talked about it with Vahid, went to the orthopedic, got a clear diagnosis of arthritis in my knee. I was able to make the adjustments and the changes that then helped me to feel better. And now I don't have knee pain as often. And I did have an expression I used to use with my clients, which was, as often as you can, reassess, readjust, recommit. Reassess,
Okay.
readjust, recommit.
Mhm.
So every so often, check in with yourself. How is that? How is your relationship with food right now? How is your relationship with sleep? What needs adjusting? What needs recommitting? And so I'm not, I don't believe in perfection. I don't do it well. It's actually not good for my mental health. So this flexibility is good, but also I can't also let myself get away with sitting on the couch for a long time either. So I
Okay.
have to reassess, readjust, recommit. And I'm doing the whole like copyright circle right there, guys.
All right.
I saw it. I saw it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's legally binding, everybody. So don't you dare. Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of my entire thing is I'll say the terms pre post testing, but it all means the same thing. Like reflecting on what is happening, what we're doing, how we're changing. Absolutely love that. I would say when I break it down into the pillars that you discuss, Vahid, which I really really like those pillars. I do a great job in the movement exercise department. I hope so. I'm a physical therapist. That'd be weird if I didn't. Nutrition is pretty decent, I would say. I don't spend as much time, uh, making thoughtful decisions about it unless it's around something I'm trying to achieve, right? A workout routine or a marathon or whatever the case may be. Um, Positive social interactions, pretty bad, as you guys can probably start to see the pattern here a little,
Horrendous.
Adam.
Horrendous. Yeah.
Yep, pretty bad there. I counsel a lot of my patients in mindfulness techniques and some more cognitive behavioral therapy like techniques, and I'm really bad about that myself. I have a pretty good level of stress. I feel like at all times. I'm a small business owner, family, just the normal life stresses. Don't do a great job in managing that, other than I use exercise to manage that. That's why
Mhm.
I'm so good at exercise. So that sounds weird to say. I'm the best at
I'm
exercise. Yeah. Who said that? I'm not trying to be the best at
I
exercise.
do exercise.
Yeah. So some comedian said that. Sorry, nameless comedian, as I just stole your joke. Um, but I think that might be an interesting concept to think about, is how does one affect the other, and is it upregulating another pillar or downregulating it or taking over or just becoming one? But yeah, not so good on the stress management, not so good on the positive social interactions, pretty good on the minimizing toxic substances other than being around the two of you.
Mhm.
I think I get an A+ in exercise, and sleep is pretty decent. I would say I do love my sleep. So I think the point of you asking this, which I love the question, is yes, the things that we are really comfortable with, we do pretty well at. Duh, I think that makes sense. But also, I think we should also respect the fact that we have a fairly deep understanding of human anatomy and physiology. And that makes it a lot easier for us to assess something or recognize something or reflect on something. And I think we need to appreciate the challenge that a lot of other folks have, is that they don't know what they don't know, right? So it could be really, really challenging to even begin that assessment of any number of those pillars. So, yeah,
Okay.
I'll give myself an overall grade of a B minus, a strong B minus.
Okay. All right. I'll take that.
I feel honored that you'd call me a risky substance, Adam.
Yeah.
Is that exciting for you? Do you feel like you can
I think
go out in the
I'm
world
gonna
now?
have to correct. He said toxic substance, but just
Yeah, it was toxic, but
yeah,
I appreciate that you took
you
that,
interpreted
internalized that as
as a
risky.
risky substance. That speaks to each of your self-talk, by the
There
way.
you
Which
go.
yeah, I'm definitely a toxic substance. But anyhow, um, all right, cool. I appreciate you answering those questions, or that question. Um, I believe that that was all I had to. Yeah, I have a few things. So I want to be able to end each of these episodes with something completely off topic, just a silly question. I don't know, because it's just kind of makes me feel good. I have no idea why I do it. And I have a list, and I'm just kind of going through it to see which one would be well received today, because you guys didn't tell me. Um, I'm gonna go with one of these, like what grinds my gears, kind of like was a Family
Do
Guy.
it.
Yeah,
Love it. Do it.
was okay, or I'm gonna call it the "Am I the asshole?" question. Okay, so I have this, I have
Yes.
this pet
Yes.
peeve with left turn lanes here, right? Um, just for reference, I came from Canada before I was in the US, and I'm used to, if you are, if it's like a 2 lane or more road going into a 2 lane or more road, right, at an intersection, and you are turning left, right, and the oncoming traffic wants to turn right, you get to turn left into your lane that's on the left hand side, and the oncoming traffic that's turning right can turn simultaneously into their lane that is on the right hand side. But I don't know if it's an Atlanta thing. I don't know if it's a Georgia thing, or what it is. When I do that, if I'm the right turner and I try to turn into my lane, it is like disaster. Folks are honking at me like, how dare you even make that right turn? I need 3 lanes to make a left turn here. Am I the asshole?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. All right.
I don't know. I'm withholding my answer. I need more information.
I'm gonna have to draw this out. We're gonna have to sit down and debate this.
I'll
Yeah,
tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is. I do think the time of day matters. Like if it's like the 8 a.m. traffic hour and you're one more car that get, I mean, I drive this terrible street called Piedmont every day when I'm trying to get to work. And if one car gets in front of me or something, then that pushes me back behind a light. And so it just depends on like what else is going on that on the rest
And
of the
that's my
street.
point. Nobody has to get in front of anybody. You have your own lane. But anyway, yeah,
Okay,
I,
and
th-
there's
I, I
also
think Atlanta is an area with a lot of very low confidence drivers. I said it.
you said it. Okay,
Yep.
I think that's a good note to end on. Just piss
Yeah.
people off and hang up.
Yep.
I love it. All right. Well, that was it for today. Unless you guys want to throw anything else in there, I appreciated today's conversation. I think it was really insightful for me, at least. And if it wasn't for you, listener, well, then it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Find another podcast.
I will remind everybody that this podcast is for informational purposes only
Oh God.
and does
Here we
not
go.
constitute medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider. And thank you for listening to Take Three and Call Me in the Morning. It's been a wonderful afternoon.
If you guys send Vahid $50, he is legally obligated to this medical advice. So go ahead and mail him $50.
There you go.
Good.
His address is 1899 Parisford.
All right.
Do we
see,
want to tease the next episode?
I don't think we've really narrowed it down to what. I mean, we've talked about a couple of different topics. Unless somebody's got something burning, that they want to address next week. No?
Are we?
Let's talk
We're
about
still recording. We are
a
still live.
healthcare
Yeah.
related topic. How about that for a teaser?
A healthcare related topic. I like that.
Well, did you guys ever record the what was it you were going to do together? The lifting or the muscle? Some kind of. What was your first episode that I wasn't there at?
What was our first test episode?
I don't know. That was a fever dream.
Yeah, I honestly, we just hit record and started talking. This is where we need the outro music. Adam, cough, cough. All right, there's a down, 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 whatever. Oh, there we go. I didn't know you had that. Just sitting there. All right, well, we will see you guys next time.